We're tackling Chapter 12, Morality, Religion, and Justice. We have one more lecture left. Next week we'll tackle Chapter 13 and 14. Let's go ahead and get started. Morality, Religion, and Justice. I know I pick on religion a lot, but maybe I won't be so mean this time. Let's see how I do. Ethnocentrism leads people to assume that their own culture's way are better or more natural than that of any other culture. Ethnocentrism allowed Europeans to force their understanding of morality, religion, and justice on all the indigenous people they came across, all in the name of their definition of civilization. And that is a form of ethnocentrism. 1971, Lawrence Kohlberg developed his stages of moral development. Level 1 is known as the pre-conventional level. Level 2 is the conventional level. And level 3 is the post-conventional level. Not the most novel names for his three levels, but we'll talk about them right now. And that's Lawrence Kohlberg. Pre-conventional moral reasoning suggests that people interpret morality based on a calculation of how much better or worse off they would be for acting in a certain way. Morality at this level is about trying to behave in a way that provides the best overall return, and that's pre-conventional morality. Conventional moral reasoning is about viewing actions as moral to the extent that they help maintain and facilitate the social order. This level dictates that morality is about following the rules, and individuals should not question where those rules come from. Post-conventional moral reasoning is based on the consideration of abstract ethical principles of what is right and wrong, and moral decisions are reached based on the logical extensions of those principles. Good behavior is seen as that which is consistent with a set of universal ethical principles that emphasize justice and individual rights. And of course, this is an underage girl, and she's trying to decide whether she should drink or not. She's got a beer. Snary in 1985 did a meta-analysis of the 27 cultural areas from around the world that had been tested using Kohlberg's parameters. There was some universality in moral reasoning. In all cultures, there were some adults who reasoned at the conventional levels, and in no cultural groups did the average adult reason at the pre-conventional level. So if you're an adult, you were looking. Of course, most of the places that Kohlberg tested were collectivist, and collectivists, of course, would immediately go to the conventional level. They're not selfish people. They give to the group. So conventional morality would be logical. Evidence of post-conventional moral reasoning was not universally found. Moral reasoning based on justice and individual rights. And this is what he thought was going to happen, because this is what he saw was happening in the United States. Every urban Western sample contained at least some individuals who showed reasoning based on justice and individual rights. Not a single person from the traditional tribal and village folk populations showed such reasoning. Why? Because they were individualism is a cultural norm, and the tribal and village folk are more collectivist than they are individualistic. One reason for the discrepancy between traditional societies and more urbane Western societies may be because of the educational experiences of both societies. Traditional educational practices may not include the same ideas of justice and individual rights. Another explanation for the discrepancies between traditional and Western cultures is that the two types of cultures live in different environments. Because of the harsher environment, tribal and village populations have more concerns than justice and individual rights. Schrader and colleagues in 1977 argued that Kohlberg's model of moral reasoning only represented one of the three codes that people use for moral judgments around the world: ethics of autonomy, ethics of community, and ethics of divinity, or their ideas of moral reasoning. That's where we get our moral reasoning. Schrader and his group referred to Kohlberg's model as an ethic of autonomy. The ethic views morality in terms of individual freedom and rights violations. An act is seen as immoral under the ethic of autonomy when it directly hurts another person or infringes on another's rights and freedoms as an individual. A second code of ethics that Schrader and colleagues proposes is an ethic of community, which emphasizes the individuals have duties that conform with their roles in a community or social hierarchy. According to this code, there is an ethical principle to uphold one's interpersonal duties and obligations toward others. Actions are seen as wrong when individuals fail to perform their duties. A third code that Schrader and colleagues suggested was an ethic of divinity, which is concerned with sanctity and the perceived natural order of things. This code contains the ethical principle that one is obligated to preserve the standards mandated by a transcendent authority. Actions are seen as immoral if they cause impurity or degradation of oneself or others, or if one shows any disrespect for God or God's creations. And of course, I should also spell God with a small g. This is kind of an interesting picture, that one of the problems they have in India is the fact that the natural order of things to some men is that if a woman does something wrong, then they have the right to rape that individual. And this has been happening around India, that groups of men will rape someone. Usually, it's a teenage girl, and of course, the women of India are enraged. Some of them are, but others aren't. This seems to be a moral imperative that the men are claiming because they're Hindu, because they're Muslim, and of course that isn't part of their isn't part of their religion. So this has been happening, and actually there was a woman that was raped on a bus and killed. She was killed. And there were 7 men that were involved, and 3 of them were put to death. So this is a question that is continuous. Tradition tells us we can do one thing, but society tells us we can't do that thing. Should it be allowed to happen? Should we follow our religion, or should we follow our government? And the answer some men are taking is I should follow my traditions and my religion. German sociologist Ferdinand Tönnies argued that there are 2 ways that people can relate to each other in a group. Gemeinschaft, the community relationships bind people together with the social glue of concord, and Gesellschaft, people act as individuals and have weak binds with society. Gemeinschaft is a more small community situation, and Gesellschaft is these big mega cities that we have in the world today. Gemeinschaft groups are characteristic of small folk group organizations, and within these groups, interpersonal relationships play an especially important role. People feel connected to one another because they feel a unity of spirit. The relationships are central to an individual's identity. Obligations associated with one's Gemeinschaft carry weight of full moral obligations. Gesellschaft are groups that are characteristic of modern Western societies and treat relationships as imaginary, instrumental, as a means to an end. Gesellschaft groups are perceived as relatively impersonal and somewhat contractual, which leads to the necessity of justice obligations to govern disputes between individuals. In Gesellschaft groups, individuals can't be expected to always to behave in pro-social ways toward others because they have strong obligations toward them. So formalized rules are necessary to keep people in line. People the world over feel a moral obligation to their community. Objective obligations. People believe that they have an obligation to act in a certain way, even if there is no official rule or law that requires them to do so. Legitimately regulated, people should be prevented from engaging in a moral violation, or they should be punished if they act in such a way. Ethic of divinity involves a moral code respecting the sanctity of the natural order of things as dictated by a transcendent moral authority. Immoral actions are perceived to violate the natural order of things. Hunter in 1991 proposed that a culture war exists in the United States and that the battle lines are drawn between those who have an impulse toward orthodoxy and those who have an impulse toward progressivism. And in this picture, of course, the individual that with the peace sign is the person that has an impulse toward progressivism, and the guy that's all dressed up has an impulse toward orthodoxy. The orthodox guy is calling the progressive guy a pinko meaning vaguely communistic, and the other guy's calling the dressed up guy a Nazi, which is fascism, of course. Religious adherents who are orthodox are committed to the idea of transcendent authority. This authority is viewed to have existed long before humans and as operating independently of people. This authority is believed to be more knowledgeable and more powerful than all of human experience. In the Orthodox view, this transcendent authority created a moral code and revealed it to human beings in sacred texts. The moral code is perceived to stand across all times and circumstances and should not be altered to accommodate any social changes or individual differences. Individuals in society are expected to adapt themselves to this ordained moral code. And this is one of the reasons why, if you are reading one of these texts, like the Quran or the Bible, you need to, or the Torah, you need to capitalize it, because it is a sacred text to select individuals. Adherents of progressive religions emphasize the importance of human agency in understanding and formulating a moral code. Progressivists reject the view that a transcendent authority reveals itself and its will to humans. They believe that humans play an integral role in the formulation of moral codes. Progressivists believe that because social circumstances change the moral code must change along with people. In 2007, Haidt and Graham expanded Schrader's 3 moral ethics by expanding it to 5. Avoid harm, protect fairness, be loyal to your in-group, respect hierarchy, and achieve purity. And this is Haidt, and this is Graham right there. Avoid harm. People are sensitive to any behaviors that cause harm to others. Protect fairness. They attend closely to whether resources or rights are distributed in a fair way. Loyalty to their in-groups. People are motivated to identify with their in-groups, make sacrifices to their in-groups, trust in-group members more than they trust out-group members. Respect hierarchy. People tend to respect hierarchy by admiring their superiors and believing subordinates need to act in accordance with the wishes of the authority figures. Achieve purity, reflecting the ethic of divinity. People are motivated to achieve purity and are disgusted at behaviors ruled by the carnal passions such as lust or gluttony, or by behaviors that suggest contamination of any kind. There is a greater emphasis on faith in Christianity, especially Protestantism, than in Judaism. Membership in Judaism is defined by descent. Traditionally, one becomes Jewish by being born to a Jewish biological mother. So as long as you have a Jewish biological mother, you're Jewish. While Christianity is based on beliefs, traditional Judaism emphasizes particular practices, such as keeping kosher by avoiding certain foods like pork. So Judaism is different than Christianity, and that is one of the ways that they are different. In Judaism, of course, You have to be born into the religion. Your mother has to be Jewish. This is one of the reasons why Jewish men rarely marry non-Jewish women. It's because just because they're Jewish doesn't mean that their children are going to be Jewish, especially if it's a lady that's not Jewish. Protestant sect membership is primarily defined by beliefs. One cannot become a member of a church until one publicly accepts the Christian faith as dictated by a specific church and is thus baptized into that church. Christianity has fewer practices and instead places more emphasis on one's private communications with God. We're talking about Protestants. Okay, reflecting the differential emphasis in practices and beliefs, a survey asked Jewish and Protestant participants how important practices and beliefs were for being religious. The results revealed that Jewish participants rated practices as more important than beliefs for being religious, whereas Protestants put greater emphasis on beliefs than practices. Jewish and Protestant participants were asked to evaluate a story of a married man contemplating having an affair with a woman in his office. All participants viewed extramarital liaisons as immoral, but the Protestants saw thinking about having an affair as sinful as having an affair. The Jewish participants limit their moral domain to what people do and not what they think. Now, this is really kind of interesting because during the 1976 presidential campaign, Jimmy Carter gave an interview to Playboy magazine and admitted, Jimmy Carter, who was a good Baptist, admitted that he lusted in his heart, which meant that he had lusted for other women but had never done anything, or he didn't have any affairs. And of course, as far as his religion is concerned, the Baptist religion, he had sinned because thinking about it is just as bad as doing it, as far as Protestants are concerned. So the surprising thing was that it didn't really damage his standing with the electorate. He was still elected president of the United States in 1976, and he served for one term. Distributing resources, you can distribute resources by the principle of need, which dictates that resources are directed to those who need them the most. Distributing resources, principle of equality dictates that resources should be shared equally among members of a group. And this is an idea that is touted by the economic structure of socialism. Socialism says that everybody should get the same thing. Distributing principle of equity states that resources are distributed based on an individual's contributions. The more an individual produces, the more resources they receive. And this, of course, is piecework. When I worked in, where was I? I was working in at Warner Machine in Muncie, Indiana. I was working as a machine operator, and sometimes we got to do piecework. Well, I'm young, and at the time I was young. I'm not anymore, but I was in my early 20s, and I was fairly physical, so I could move those pieces through, and at one point I was making twice as much as anybody else. But then they stopped giving me piecework, and the reason they did is because I was moving too many pieces, and that was they were afraid that they were going to lower the standard, and if they lowered the standard, that meant that you had to produce more pieces for less money. So they took me off the line and just gave me a salary because I was making too much money. And the union didn't like it because they were afraid that they were going to change the criteria. A social system that rewards individuals on the basis of the equity principle is known as a meritocracy. And meritocracies tend to be more common in individualistic societies. They can lead workers to be highly motivated to work hard because their earnings depend on their efforts. When one worker does well, others tend to do worse. Meritocratic systems tend to breed competition among the workers. In some organizations, raises are distributed by longevity. This is known as the seniority system. Seniority systems follow the principle of equality because there is no competition between the workers. Pay is determined using the same formula for everyone, and this is very common in Japan, as I'm going to say right now. It is often assumed that merit-based pay is the way to ensure the greatest amount of effort from one's employees. However, Japanese workers have traditionally been among the hardest working in the world. There tends to be a great deal of voluntary overtime, and many workers never take their vacations. And Japanese companies tend to have more seniority-based pay than American organizations. Sleeping at your desk is thought to be a good thing in Japan because you work so hard, you put in so many hard hours that you're taking your nap at your desk. Social scientists have developed various economic games to measure people's sense of fairness. In the coin flip scenario, you're given $100 that has been given to you instead of another person by means of a coin flip. Now the deal is you don't know who this other person is. And they flip the coin and you have $100 if you win. And of course you always win because that's what the argument's about, or that's what the game is about. So you can give the other person any portion of the $100, but they will never know who you are. So they're not going to find out that you gave them any money at all. So the question is, do you take the whole 100 or do you give the other person some of the money? You guys make up your minds. This is known as a dictator game, and there are various outcomes. Economic theory dictates that the rational person, this is economic theory, this is those business guys that are right down the hall from the psychology department. Economic theory dictates that the rational person will give their invisible partner nothing because they will never know who you are and you don't stand to gain anything from them. This is the economic theory. That's the business people. So as far as they're concerned, you just take all the money and he'll never know that he's missing anything. Curiously, the economic theory almost never happens. People around the world feel that keeping all the money for themselves is not right, and it just seems fair to give the other person some money. The most common decision that people make is a 50-50 split, even though the guy has no clue that the $50 is coming to him, and he has no idea where the $50 came from. That's still the way it works. When economists found that even Western college students, the greedy people that they are, were making irrational decisions in the dictator game by giving away money that would not benefit them, they sought an explanation. This did not fit any economic models that they had developed. What is going on with these crazy people? A surprise to everyone, people in the United States averaged the highest amount of money to the invisible partner in the dictator game, $47. Factors that dictated the concept of fairness included the amount of calories negotiated at market for food and being a member of a world religion, Christianity and Islam, where God observes one's fairness. And of course, this is a joke. This is God watching a man pee into the ocean. And of course, God's not real happy about it. You got to pee someplace. Another game is a public goods game. A group of 4 people are given $10 each. If the individuals donate all their money into a common pool, they are all rewarded with 1.6 times the pot, or $64, and each person gets $16. However, if one person holds their $10 out, the pot only ends up at $48, and they will each get $12. The free rider now has $22. As the number of rounds increased, the researchers found that the group made less and less money because the temptation to be a free rider was just too great. Because of this, the researchers decided to add a new factor to the game. The player could now pay $1 of their own money and have one of the free riders forfeit $3. The players seemed perfectly willing to pay their own money to get another player punished. The researchers found that with the punishment rule, cooperation increased quite dramatically and remained stable across time. The researchers proposed that a key factor that allowed human cooperation to evolve was people's willingness to engage in this kind of altruistic punishment. By feeling motivated to punish those who weren't cooperating, people were able to ensure that group members didn't free ride, which allowed humans to develop norms for cooperation and for large societies to flourish. Altruistic punishment. And that's theoretically what our laws are about, altruistic punishment. That's what they're supposed to be anyway. When the public goods game was played around the world, altruistic punishment was practiced. However, in addition to the tendency for altruistic punishment, in many societies, people showed strong tendencies for what researchers called antisocial punishment. The researchers found that some people were willing to pay their own money to punish another player, even if that player was cooperating. And this is the antisocial punishment. The motivation for this antisocial punishment seemed to be largely a function of revenge, in which people would punish a player who had punished them on a previous round. Although this tendency for antisocial punishment was negligible in weird societies, Western societies. In other societies, this behavior predominated. Antisocial punishment predominates in Oman more than any other country. Antisocial punishment dominates in Greece as the second highest level measured. Antisocial punishment predominates in Saudi Arabia as the third highest level measured. Antisocial punishment predominates in Russia as the fourth highest level measured. They were punishing people for revenge. The notion that punishment promotes cooperation holds true only in societies characterized by norms for civic cooperation and high levels of trust. Antisocial punishment was entirely unexpected by the researchers who first discovered it, but it appears to be quite commonplace in many cultures, and it remains somewhat puzzling. The researchers' data show that societies with weaker norms for civic cooperation and a weaker rule of law engaged in more antisocial punishment in public goods games. Other researchers argue that antisocial punishment can be adaptive in contexts where the rule of law is insufficient. In dealing with a system that can't always be trusted to function, people come up with alternative ways to ensure that their needs are met. In Brazil, there is a complex sociocultural strategy termed Getimbo, by which people manipulate or dodge the official rules to achieve things, and cheating on tests is part of Getimbo in Brazil, strangely enough. This is a picture where everybody in the room has had to put blinders on in order to take the test, because they don't want them looking at somebody else's paper. A real-life example of these weaker norms for civic cooperation can be seen in the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? In the show, which was originally created in the United Kingdom, contestants are able to use a lifeline and can poll the studio audience for help in answering a difficult question. We had a version of it in the United States. It was very popular. Regis Philbin was the host. He has since died. I don't think it's on television anymore. I'm pretty sure it's not. When Who Wants to Be a Millionaire was introduced in Russia, the contestants quickly found out that they couldn't trust the audience. Frequently, the audience members would deliberately choose the wrong answer in an apparent effort to mislead the contestants. Not unlike the public goods game, many members of the Russian audience seemed to be more motivated to sabotage the play of the contestants than to help them. As Barfman in 2009 brothers have said, the Brafman brothers, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russians became suspicious of those who were trying to profit off the hard work of others. Norms for civic cooperation remain relatively low in Russia and many other societies around the world, which makes it more difficult for governments to band citizens together in cooperative ventures. And this is one of the reasons for what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is losing his popularity in the country, so that may be one of the reasons why he started the war with Ukraine. This is a picture of a member of a group that named themselves to insult the Russian government. They call themselves Pussy Riot. I apologize for the term, but that's the name of their group. They are a, what's the word I'm looking for? They put on demonstrations. They do really odd things. They put on a concert in a church in Red Square, in the sacristy, and of course some of them are arrested. There's 11 members of the group, and I think only one of them's in jail now, but they have been arrested and put in jail for an extended period of time. This is the last World Cup, which was played in Russia, and this is a member of Pussy Riot running onto the field, and this is a game between France and Croatia. And of course, they cover their faces up so nobody can identify them. And here they are. They put on a concert. This is in Red Square, and here they are. Their lyrics, you can listen to them if you like. You can go on YouTube and type in the name of the group. I won't say it again. And their music is interesting. It's really kind of interesting. And of course, they will translate it for what they're talking about. Anyway, so that's part of being Russian, I guess. And that is the end of my lecture, I believe. Yep, I think it is. Okay, I'll see you guys next week. We're going to tackle 2 chapters next week.